Good morning. Today we are looking at narrative elements. We're going to look at seven of them: setting, character, conflict, plot, point of view, symbol, and theme. So we're going to start with setting. What's setting? Setting is the time, the location, the physical location, even what the weather is like. So a setting for a story can be in on an island like Jamaica. It can be in a school, on a street. So it is basically where the story takes place. Setting is very important. Setting sets the tone or the mood. We can discover what the genre is of a story by setting in terms of time. So if a story is set a long, long time ago in the 18th century, even in the 1960s, we can call that historical. If it's set in the future time, for example, 2058 or 3055, we know that that is science fiction, and we have contemporary fiction that occurs present day. So that's setting. And of course, we have to understand that the weather also affects setting. So if it's snowy, maybe the persona is sad, and then the mood of the story is sad. So basically, setting affects atmosphere. So let me repeat: setting is time, place, weather, and this can affect the mood and atmosphere of a story that you're reading. So let me just read a little bit for you. Atmosphere. This element has a close connection to the setting because it often determines the atmosphere. The atmosphere is the mood or the tone of the story. Atmosphere is usually established at the beginning of the story, and it takes in characters, clothing, furniture, natural surroundings, light, darkness, shadow, and even weather. So that is setting. So the next thing we're on to is our characters. A story is not a story without characters, but what we need to understand is that the characters are don't necessarily have to be only people. So let's go. Characters are the people, animals, or things that take part in the action of a story. So characters can be creatures, animals, people, and then of course that leads into genre. So if you have creatures and animals, more than likely it's fantasy. If it's regular people set in a regular time, then it's contemporary fiction. So our definition, a clear definition of character is the people we meet in books. Their feelings, thoughts, actions help us to determine their personality and their character traits. And of course, it makes the story that we're reading very interesting. Now, there are two types of characters that, as literature students, we are very interested in. This is our protagonist and our antagonist. Our protagonist is the main character of the story. This person is often the hero or the character that the audience is supposed to feel most sympathetic towards. Our antagonist, on the other hand, is the primary adversary of the protagonist, the villain, for lack of a better word. And of course, we can't talk about characters without talking about character traits. What are character traits? Character traits are long-term action that a character exhibits. It can't be short-term. It has to be something that the character does over a period of time, and we call it a trait. So we use an adjective to describe that. So the character can be friendly, loving, kind, but these are, if you're going to apply these traits, the character would have had to have exhibited it throughout the book. So that's character. Another very important uh, aspect is conflict. What is conflict? Conflict is the problem of the story, tension, good versus evil. So there are four different types of conflicts. Four. Number one, man versus man. That is where two people are having a quarrel or a physical fight. We have man versus nature, where man is fighting against some storm or hurricane. An example of that is I watched a movie last night called Into the Storm, where they're fighting against nature. So that's man versus nature. Man versus himself is where you have a conflict, an inner conflict. Should I do this? Should I do that? I'm conflicted. That's man versus man. Man versus society is where you have you alone standing, or a character alone standing against some societal value that the man is breaking. So you have man versus society. Legal issues are often categorized as man versus society. All right. So the conflict, by the way, is essential because you're not going to want to read a book if the conflict is not rich. So the conflict makes the story interesting. Hands down, it makes it interesting. Most of the action and suspense in a story centers around the main character or characters trying to find a solution to the conflict. That's conflict. Plot. Plots are very important as well. Plot is literally what happens in a story. The plot is made up of the problem, important events, and the resolution, how it is tidied up. So there are different types of plots. I'm going to just run over what I call the basic plot, which is really uh, something called Freytag's. Uh, Go back up to this slide. It's called Freytag's pyramid. So Freytag's pyramid starts with an exposition. It moves up to an inciting incident, then it moves up to a rising action, then you have a climax, then a reversal, falling action, then resolution. So basically the basic plot looks like this, like a hill. And a lot of the stories are the basic plot. They use Freytag's pyramid. Then I particularly like the flashback. The flashback can happen within the basic, where you're getting a picture of what happened before, and then they come back. And then there's a cliffhanger that ends. This is our basic. The cliffhanger ends at the top there, at the climax. So it stops at the climax, and I'm sure you know many movies, many books that end on a climax. The next thing, so that's plot. The next thing is point of view. That's important to a story because it affects the mood, it affects our understanding of what's going on in the story. So the first one is first person. Now we can identify that very easily by the use of the I. So that's first person. The third person, we have two types of third person. We have third person limited and third person omniscient. The omniscient is where it's like godlike. The narrator is godlike. They're seeing what happens. You have four characters in the book and you know what's going on in the four people's heads. It's usually very interesting. I usually like an omniscient book. For the third person limited usually looks at one or two characters, and it has kind of like an invisible narrator that usually focuses on one or two characters instead of many. So that is our POV, or point of view. So next on our list is symbols. Symbols are objects, figures, animals, character. A symbol can be any single thing, as long as it represents an abstract idea or concept, like love. So when you think of symbols, think of abstract nouns like love, honesty, etc. And you're using objects like this. Even this cell phone could represent honesty because you're using it to share with others. An example that I used in my class is Dumbo's magic feather. Dumbo's magic feather represents courage and self-confidence. So once he truly believed in himself, he no longer needed the feather as a psychological crutch. Let me see if I completed that. I have one more. Theme. Theme is often the lesson that we learn in a story, but not just the lesson, it's that thread, that cohesive thread, that one word or phrase that we can use to define what's going on in the story. So, for example, a book like To Kill a Mockingbird, clearly our theme is racism because everything around the book kind of revolves around racism, you know? So that's theme. So a definition of theme, let me give you a clear definition, is what the story teaches readers, the life lesson, meaning, moral, and of course, my addition, that thread that weaves through that story. So examples of themes are acceptance, courage, perseverance, cooperation, so many abstract nouns that could describe themes. So I hope you enjoy this journey along narrative techniques. It's very important because it forms the linchpin of how we analyze in English literature. And this video is applicable to all grades 7 to 13 because you need these particular terms to analyze. So I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it is helpful to you, and have a great rest of the day.